The vote is over, the results are in, and the newest creature coming with ARK Survival Ascended is the Shastasaurus. The first ever exclusive for the centre, and the first fully aquatic tame since the Leopleurodon over 6 years ago. Alright folks, my name is Freyn, and obviously today I'm going to be talking about the recent vote, how it panned out, and of course the winning Shastasaurus submission in full detail. As always, if you find yourself enjoying it, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel, as every bit helps. But for now, let's have a look at that vote. Well, right from the moment the submissions opened, it was clear that there was a big desire for a new ocean-going creature to be added, and the centre was chosen as the most fitting place to put one. The entrants were overwhelmingly water-based, with even the few terrestrial creatures put forth having functions related to the sea. Of course, there is a lot more voters in the second stage, and it's possible that they wouldn't agree with this, but the evidence still leaned towards a water bias. A lot of YouTubers were nudging the voters that way, and when the final votes came through, the Bahadasaurus was the first to fall down in 10th place, taking home only 3% of the first round votes. Already we can see a clear favourite in the Shastasaurus as well, the biggest margin of any of these votes so far, with the real battle being for what comes in third. The Cyvodus fell out in 9th, likely on the surface just seen as just another meg unfortunately, with the Shasta picking up the largest share of carryovers, but the Hets also taking a fair chunk of votes as well, I suspect from a small group who wanted anything but an ocean-going creature. Dropping out in number 8 is the Thoracopterus, surprisingly low in my opinion for a stealthy multi-purpose mount. And that was followed closely by the Lobster Medic Pemphix. Clearly showing some crustacean solidarity, the hermit crab takes by far the largest share from the Doctor's demise, leaving our apex flyer of the Hatzegopteryx to fall out in 6th. Moving into the top 5, it's still a very close race for third, but ultimately the Marasanonyx went out next. A respectable spot and a popular creature in previous votes, but while I do understand the desire for something ocean-going this time, I felt the Marasanonyx got a lot more hate than it deserved here, just for simply daring to not be an aquatic submission. Next out goes the Orca, a cool mechanic which made use of some trophies finally, but surprising in my opinion to see such a modern creature fall so high. And while the Nothsaur again just squeezed out of elimination, third seems to be the highest it can dodge to. The Shasta though, on the other hand, has almost won already with another round still to go. It's had a commanding lead the entire time, and while there was a lot of love for the hermit crab over the last 2 weeks, ultimately it just couldn't come close, and predictably, the Shasta wins. So a big congratulations to dpooley69 and the Shasta on being the latest member of the elite club. The conversation the last few weeks around various places has been leaning heavily towards either the Shasta or the hermit crab, but votes have surprised us before, and with two big rival groups often effectively eliminating each other, allowing an underdog to slip through, I wasn't fully prepared to commit to which I thought would win here. But in the end, a very clear-cut victory. Perhaps my push to consider the entire rankings and not just the top and bottom slots was successful? Or more likely it's just clearly an appealing design, and I think fairly easy to see why. That submarine is a big draw for anyone who isn't fond of the ocean. While obviously still technically as vulnerable as every other ocean-going tame, because of course the creature can still die just the same, there is a psychological difference, even in a game, between your character being exposed sitting on a saddle, or safely inside an underwater bunker. Now though, let's take a detailed look through the design, as I think there's many angles and features here that explain the huge popularity. First and simplest, what is a Shastasaurus? Well, it's a gigantic 21 meter long species of ichthyosaur. You know, those annoying dolphin looking things that always crowd you and stop you being able to move. Hopefully not a trait something this big will share. But despite its incredible size, it was not an apex predator, instead feeding on small soft-bodied prey like squid. And I think this is a big part of its ARK appeal. Whether correct or not, there is a section of the community which feels that every new submission is simply a game of top trumps adding larger and larger predators to one-up the previous. So having a large but docile creature is very appealing. Being scaled up to 60 meters plus makes it large enough to possibly avoid being preyed upon by the majority of other ocean threats, and even be immune to the Tuso grab. But for once, that size doesn't come with being an increased threat to the player. It's also suggested to be a relatively simple tame, needing you to just bring some tamed ichthyes into its vicinity and let them mingle, while you play chaperone and keep the other interested parties at bay. Something probably a little too simple given the rest of its functionality, I feel, and if I had to guess at things Wildcard would tweak, this would certainly be one. It's a big endgame creature and likely would have more time-consuming and, dare I say it, frustrating method of taming. Once tamed though, the Shasta proposal comes with a few inherent abilities, the first of which is a suction feed to draw in and grab smaller creatures. The size of the target isn't specified here, but given the scale of the creature and thus scale of its jaws, I'm going to make a guess that we're talking at least the size of an ichthy. The second ability is to use its colossal tail to whip up a whirlpool behind it, entrapping and disorienting anything that might be following, like the ever-aggressive and abundant megalodons that seem to go for everything in the water. 3 varieties of echolocation-based tools exist as well, all of which help further enhance its popularity among the various crowds. A concussive pulse to knock back any would-be attacker is the first, and again for anyone afraid of the ocean, an escape tool is going to be incredibly appealing. The second is a disorienting flashbang effect which disables tech, and even tech structures, so even riding with just a basic saddle is going to have a use for a raiding party in PvP, helping to knock out turrets or tech saddles. And the third and simplest is a standard sonar pulse that highlights nearby creatures, something which could appeal to both of these groups, be it for finding bases, or just for knowing which patch of kelp has the Nidaria lurking in it. Although in the latter sometimes ignorance can be bliss, and seeing every aggressive creature highlighted might just make you leave altogether. But it is with the full saddle design that Shasta's appeal lies. A dual mode saddle for surface and submerged travel. Now while the Mosa and Plessy already carry platforms to build protective housing on for those weary ocean goers, they are more dangerous to acquire and you still need scuba to operate them. There's of course the Megakellon on Lost Island, Genesis and Fjorda, which allows building and provides you with oxygen. But that's a long taming process and not particularly mobile. And of course with all of these options, they still require some building, and buildings can be destroyed. The submersible saddle here on the Shasta, on the other hand, with concept art provided once more by the very talented Risky Biscuits, would function as a self-contained unit. Oxygen, building platform, and a barrier to the outside world all in one. And as a saddle, presumably, it will be intact as long as the creature stays alive, which with its aforementioned sonic tools would be reasonably achievable. It's even got a handy periscope and is big enough to house other tames and take them underwater with you, should you want to venture into an underwater cave. These are all things that help someone feel that little bit safer down in the depths. And if you still don't feel safe enough or you want to take it on the attack instead of the defense, there's always a set of high explosive torpedoes which you can craft in the saddle, allowing you to deal some pretty hefty damage to anything that gets in your way. The saddle's second mode would come into play once you reach the surface, transforming instead into something more akin to a whaling ship, with harpoons aplenty and probably 1 or 2 players going "Arr!" even though that's pirates and not whalers. The harpoons are suggested to be fairly weak, with players able to break free by filling a struggle bar, and requiring multiple hooks to be able to reel in the larger creatures, or potentially even breaking if overused. But aside from the taming method, this is the biggest thing I think Wildcard might take away or change. The transformation into ship is of course the more demanding part of this submission. The animation and model set are a lot more work, while the submersible on the other hand is the most prominently advertised piece of the design. It's even the primary artwork being posted around in the community crunch, something which I think they'd be quite hesitant to do if they had intentions of not following through with it. It's not often they pick something that clearly shows function instead of just form when they publicise the finalists. But what do you think of the Shastasaurus coming to the centre? Will it be enough to get you back in the ocean? Or is simply the least played map getting a new addition to the least loved biome, dooming them both to remain at the bottom of the appeal pile? We'll have to see. Now, if the pattern holds, a new submission period will begin next week, although for what map I can't say, as any mention of an upcoming one in this crunch was suspiciously absent. Thank you all very much for watching, I hope it's been of use, and I'll be back when the next vote begins. Here's some other content in the meantime. Bye bye.